She'd staggered away in spite of being stabbed in the chest, and as it turned out in the heart. She'd staggered into the bathroom. So Tom goes up to help. They lock themselves in the bathroom, or they go into the bathroom with Mia. Ayad then gets up, attacks a dog, attacks the owner's Alsatian, and kills it with the same knife. Legs are upstairs. Tom comes to the bathroom door to confront him and says, all right, mate, I'm putting words into his mouth. I don't know exactly what. Calm down. Don't be daft. Look what you've done. Let us help Mia now. And knocks the door. So the CCTV camera you can see what's going on the balcony, and the bathroom is just at the far end of the balcony.
The Leggett podcast is sponsored by Montrex. Montrex is a cutting-edge sportswear brand empowering athletes across the world, built to enhance performance and give you confidence to go the extra mile. They've got some of the most incredible products at montrex.com. There is a link below this video. Click the link and at checkout enter the code LEGIT for 15% off your order. That's LEGIT, all one word. Everything from jackets, cargo pants, gym tops, t-shirts, running jackets, running pants. Everything is on their website, and they sponsor some of the most incredible athletes. Everything from UFC fighter Leon Edwards and a good friend of the podcast, boxer Jazza Dickens. So click the link below, use the code LEGIT at checkout for 15% off your order. Rightio, it's Leggett Podcast. We have ourselves Tom Wickstead.
It's me, Andy Grant, and this week's guest is Les Jackson.
Hi guys.
Thank you, Les, mate. Thank you.
Really appreciate this.
No problem.
First off, again, massive thanks to Montrex sponsoring the podcast. If you want your 15% off, type in Leggett and you get to the basket. Yep. Do all that. Follow them on Instagram. Again, massive thanks for their support. Right, this week's show, Les, honestly, mate, massive thank you for coming here. I was put on to you by Grace, Dr. Grace Robinson, we've had on the show, fellow Congletonian.
I'm not a Congletonian.
Well, no, I know you're a Scouser, but that's how she knows you, from Congleton.
Yeah.
And I was put onto your book, A Life Well Read.
That's it.
Great book. And
thanks.
What I found was really interesting about it, it was a book that, well, again, tell me if I'm wrong by saying this, but I feel it's just a book of, you've kind of thought one day, you know what, I've had a pretty interesting life. I've got this love affair with Liverpool Football Club, and it's tinged with, you know, personal tragedy and sadness, and you've thought to yourself one day, I think people should maybe know. Am I wrong in saying that? I don't know.
It was not exactly right like that. I mean, I'm happy for you to say that. I started it because of what happened to Tom. I just wrote about what happened when I found out about Tom and my journey to Australia, and coming back, and you know the impact that had on us. So that's how it started. And I just let a few friends have a read of that, and I got some nice comments back. And then my other son Dan, his partner was expecting a baby, and I thought, well, actually, I could do something for that they can read and pick up on when they get older, you know what I mean? So I thought, well, yeah, I'll just write about my life, and it was for the family. It wasn't for anybody else. No, it's just for family.
You get that when you're reading it. You get that it's almost like your personal memoirs told.
Well, it is. That's
exactly it. Yeah. So I think, you know, for anyone who does read it, and again, I would suggest that people go and buy it. It is just like kind of, if I've been mates with you, you know, listening to you go in the game, you know, you love what you felt when Liverpool were winning, were losing. Yeah. Again, with what was going on with family.
Yeah. No, that's right. Yeah. But it's not all Liverpool. I didn't want it to be all Liverpool. I mean, obviously there's a lot of Liverpool, but it's not like a diary of what we've won, what we've lost, all the games have been to. It's just where things have popped into my head about that time in my life.
Well, I think when
I've picked, you know.
Yeah, well, I just think for anyone who's a big footy fan, you know, football does play a part in life, because you can remember where you were for those certain moments and things like that, you know. So I think it reads really well with that. Yeah. So again, yeah. You say.
I was just going to say, could we? I mean, again, Andy's done a cracking intro, and obviously, when Andy put me onto you, obviously I heard about what happened to Tom.
Yeah.
Back in 23rd of August 2016, was it? Yeah. Which is just, horrific and awful. So do you think we could touch on that and just talk a bit about, so going back, Tom decided to go to Australia, like was it a gap year thing, something similar to what I've done, or was it?
Tom went when he went because he was 30, and at the time, that was the age limit for going and doing this type of work that you could do over there. So he would have been virtually the oldest of the youngsters, if you like, who were working out there, and he'd spent a lot of maybe the last 5 or 6 years working in hospitality in the summer. So we worked on the Isle of Tresco, we worked on Herm, and what he'd do, he'd save up his money, and then he'd go travelling in the winter. So being all around Southeast Asia, he spent over 12 months in Cambodia, where he was an English teacher for a while. Just, wasn't qualified, he just had to go there. So, and he really got the travel bug.
There's loads of people in Cambodia speaking with a Congleton accent now.
Yeah, I've been Cambodia, and it's a fantastic country, yeah.
Yeah, I went to visit him, actually, Phnom Penh for a couple of
Yeah, Phnom Penh, yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
So anyway, he'd done that, and then he come home, and he couldn't find any meaningful work. He did a bit of work with his cousin, and he thought, I'm going to give Australia a go. That's my next port of call. So we had him home he came home in March, and he didn't go till the January. We had him home for 9 months, which was nice because you just didn't see him most of the time.
So from 18, had he kind of just been one of those, just wanted to get out and explore and see the world? 19,
he went to college. Actually, 19 he left school. Did he? No, 16 left school, went to college. Then he went to uni.
That's where he got the travelling bug, I guess.
But he never finished his uni course. And then he came out of that and then decided, he did a couple of office jobs in Liverpool for a bit, I think. But just not for Tom, you know what I mean? And knowing Tom, they were probably never going to be for Tom, do you know what I mean? He got his BTEC in sports and exercise science at college. Even Dally were going to the States. He got an offer to go to the States, and then he did his knee in. So it was a football thing, so he couldn't do that. This is what he told me anyway. There's no way I can verify that, but this is as far as I'm aware, that's what happened. And yes, and as I say, from mid-20s, maybe a bit earlier, that's when he caught the travel bug.
It is an addictive thing as well, travelling.
He loved it, yeah, he did love it. And yeah, as I say, he came home. He was with us for 9 months, and then he was off again. I mean, we knew he was going for 2 or 3 months before he went.
Yeah.
And we said, I'm off. He saved up a bit.
And was the idea to go and travel and then come back, or was he going to hopefully try and make it, get citizenship and all that kind of stuff?
I think he was open-minded when he went, and he had a bad time to start with because he just couldn't find work. He always wanted to go for the 2 years. Basically, you can go for 12 months, no problem.
Yeah.
But if you want to extend your visa for the next 12 months, you have to do farm work or something in that sector.
It's mental, that, isn't it? I know a lot of friends who've done that, and it's hard conditions, it's hard work.
And they are, a lot of them, they are exploited by some people. Not by everyone. Some of them go and have a great time. They don't see... They wouldn't have a bad word said about the place, and rightly so. And I wouldn't want to put anyone off, trying that experience. But some of them do get exploited, especially young girls, to be honest. I mean, Tom and his mate, they went out to, I think it was Mildura, and they worked a month there and never got paid. They'd started off in Melbourne with we've got family in Melbourne, so he'd started off there. Anyway, went back to Melbourne, ended up working in a hostel there for a bit, and then went out to Queensland.
So when you're saying that you get exploited, is that just kind of getting that grafting just to kind of get your citizenship, and in that then the people who are employing you just end up taking advantage of you? Yeah,
it's not all of them. It's only
not all of them.
Like, for example, Tom's circumstances when he went to the youth hostel, he was promised work. Now, naive, and he was after work. So someone said, "Yeah, come here. We've got work." And Tom was like, "Great, I need work." Now he'd have probably believed anything at that stage because he was desperate to get.
He needed work. Yeah.
His funds were running out. But when he got there was no work. So what happens then is they let him stay in the hostel, but then he owes them the rent. So he's building up a debt to the hostel owner. Now, whether the hostel owner is in cohorts with the local farmers or not, I don't know. I'm not suggesting that they are. But eventually, he's desperate. They took his passport off him, so he can't travel. They took his laptop off him to start with. He got that back.
As like security for this debt.
Yeah, but you're not. Yeah, he got that back eventually, but he didn't get his passport back. And now they're not allowed legally. They're not allowed to do that. But as Tom said, he'd spoken to the police about it, and the police said, "Well, yeah, we can get it back for you, and they shouldn't be doing it, and we can have a word with them." But what happens when they've gone away? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They take you back. Now, you speak to the hostel owner even now. She'll say, "Well, I never had this passport."
And is this in the hostel where the incident happened?
Hostel where it happened, yeah. I mean, I had a messenger conversation with him the day before he got attacked. I've still got it on my phone. And I said, when do you get your passport back? Have you got it back? He said, no. I said, well, when do you get it back? He said, when I paid off my debt, Dad. That's it.
No. So he's only in this hostel then to get the work needed for...
And he was working by then he was working, but it is that, I hadn't realised what the heat out there, and it's just bloody horrendous, isn't it?
It's a crazy setup to have that, isn't it?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of stories, similar sort of stories like that, to obviously not what happened, but similar sort of exploitation to some extent of people who literally go down the farming route to try and get that visa. It's
quite endemic by the sounds of it.
It is, yeah.
I mean, the likes of Filipinos and people from third world countries get far more exploited than all that, do I think. But, I mean, you do hear of people dying on a regular-ish basis.
Just
not being murdered, obviously, but, I mean, there was a Belgian guy only recently died of just exposure to the sun.
Exhaustion, yeah.
So he's working in the field for long hours, and he's not even allowed water.
And I guess they're so, Australia's just known, isn't it? It's the country where you're not getting in unless you've the right paperwork, etc. So you are going to do whatever work they throw at you.
100%. If you're 18 and you want to travel, yeah, of course.
And you want to get that stamp that you needed,
you're going to do it,
yeah. Yeah. The thing is, there's no guarantee that you're going to get it. That's where some of the other abuse or exploitation comes in. Some of them, especially for young girls, they're asking them to do other things to get their get sign up and all that. It
is insane, isn't it?
Yeah.
And this hostel was in Hope Hill, wasn't it?
Home Hill. Home Hill.
Home, yeah. And there was a nickname for it, which was...
It was Shelley's Hostel.
Right.
She was the owner, so it was known as Shelley's Hostel. I don't know, it's a nickname I'm aware of.
But the area, I read something that was in it, it was called, like, Home Hell or so. It was like, it was classed as like there was a bit of a dodgy. Again, I'm just reading what I've read online, but
well, yeah, I think it probably was. I mean, you can imagine Home Hill became the Home Hell Hostel, can't you?
Yeah.
It's only a little place at the end of the day. You know what I mean? It's.
So how long did? Yeah, sorry, mate. How long had Tom been staying at this hostel then for?
About 4 months, I think. When was it? August he got attacked. Yeah, it was 4 or 5 months. And the first couple of months he didn't have any work at all. So that's where he's building his debt up.
So he's almost now got to stay there now until he's paid off this debt.
Yeah. The day I spoke to him, the day before, as I say, it was a messenger conversation. He was like, I've only got about less than 20 days to do of me, and then they get me 18 days. He never mentioned whether he'd be able to pay the debt off by then, but I said so. He was coming home for his mate's wedding at some stage, and I said, why don't you just go to to the nearest embassy and say, I lost my passport, get a new one, just jib it. And it's not, you can't even get anywhere. Public transport's crap, you know what I mean? Yeah. God, it's awful. I mean, what can you do? He's not on his own because he's got good mates there. Then there's loads of Brits in this hostel.
He's his own man as well. At the same time, you can kind of advise him and say, "Come on, son." He's in Australia.
He wanted to make a go of it.
Yeah.
At the end, in fact, he said in that conversation, he said, "Believe it or not, I'm starting to find my feet." He said, after the last few months, I'm starting to find my feet, and he wanted to stay on for another 2 years and maybe even stay there longer term if he could get sponsored. So he had turned it round. Do you know what I mean? He'd had a rough start, but he'd turned it round and he was looking forward to staying.
And then on the 23rd of August, obviously he was murdered by a French national.
Yeah.
When he was trying to protect another lady who was staying there. Was it Mia? Mia, yeah.
She'd only been there a few days.
Really?
She'd only been there a few days. She'd been put into this room with this French fella and the English guy that she'd arrived with. Bunks, but there's no segregation or anything.
Yeah, it's like a mixed dorm.
Yeah. But the French fella was not the French fella. The guy she'd arrived with, the travelling mate, he was in another room at the time, and apparently this French guy had apparently taken a real shine to me, but he was a bit of a weirdo, so I don't think he'd told me he'd taken a shine to him. He just told everybody else. I think he even said to one of them he was going to marry her. And I think Mia was very wary of him.
And how old is this French guy?
Late 20s he would have been as well. He was a UFC fighter as well. He'd fought. Apparently he'd fought professionally in Thailand, so he could look after himself. But he was highly regarded by the local farming community, in that he was a good worker. And it's by all accounts, people liked him. He was fine to get on with. He even said to the mental health court, he didn't actually say, but in something that was read out, I think, that Tom was his friend. He couldn't understand. He didn't, at that time, I don't know what he does now, but at that time, he didn't accept he'd done what he'd done to Tom, because Tom was his friend.
That's insane, that, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I mean, he was, they said at the tribunal that his addiction to weed,
cannabis,
since he was, a teenager, it led to his paranoia and whatnot.
They say, don't they, if you're smoking weed at a young age, they say, I think what's the argument to legalise it, later on in life it can be in moderation, but I think when you're smoking weed, or like alcohol, when your brain's still forming, it can be really detrimental.
Apparently put a load of crap in it as well, did he? I mean, I've got to be honest, I'm completely naive on drugs. But apparently put a load of crap in it these days, did he?
No.
I don't want to get, well, I mean, for those, for those people, because obviously I don't want to be that person that presses, but for those people who are listening at home, could you just break it down exactly what happened then on that night? Yeah,
so on that night, apparently Mia's asleep in her bed, and there's only Mia and Ayad in the room. Tom's in his own room, he's working on his laptop. I don't know what everyone else is doing, people are milling about, but so from what we know, Ayad drags Mia out of bed he's got a kitchen knife. He drags Mia out of bed, comes out of the room, he starts shouting. Dan Richards, who was next door, little Welsh fella, he's then like, hang on, what's going on here? There's a load of noise then, obviously. And he just started, then the French fella just starts shouting madly and stabs me repeatedly in the chest. At which point Dan shouts down for Tom, get up here. Actually, that's not quite right. What happens is, Ayad then throws himself off the balcony, because it's only 2 stories. the room that I had the mirror in on the top floor, he does a swan dive from the balcony. Apparently there's CCTV footage that shows this. He does a swan dive from the balcony, but at the last minute does a backflip. So Tom runs out, and he's trying to help Ayad, then he doesn't know what's going on. He thinks his mate's injured on the floor, do you know what I mean? And that's when Dan shouts, Tom, Mia's been attacked. So Tom legs her upstairs, and he managed to get her into the bathroom, if she wasn't already. She might have already been there. Yeah, she staggered away, that's right. She'd staggered away, in spite of being stabbed in the chest, and as it turned out in the heart, she'd staggered into the bathroom. So Tom goes up to help. They lock themselves in the bathroom, or they go into the bathroom with Mia. Ayad then gets up, attacks a dog, attacks the owner's Alsatian, and kills it with the same knife. Legs her upstairs. Tom comes to the bathroom door to confront him and says, all right, mate, calm. I'm putting words into his mouth. I don't know. Yeah. Calm down. Don't be daft. Look what you've done. Let us help Mia now. And knocks the door. So the CCTV camera it can see what's going on the balcony, and the bathroom is just at the far end of the balcony, so it can see up to that point. So it can see Tom trying to calm him down. And then Ayad kicks the door in. And attacks Tom. Apparently, just repeatedly stabbed him in the chest and in the head.
Jesus.
Got him in the eye. I mean, I could see this when I went over there. Eventually, I could see where he'd been injured, and he didn't do anything. Apparently, he just looked at Dan and walked out.
He didn't attack the Welsh guy?
No. So you know,
it's insane.
Yeah, and then the paramedics, the police got called.
Because he carried on attacking other people, then, didn't he? As he was.
Well, I don't know whether he attacked the dog before or after that. To be honest, I know Chris Porter, who was Mia's friend. He managed to escape. He tried to warn everybody that there was this nutter on the loose now, and I think he broke his ankles when he tried to climb down a drain pipe or something. And I believe he only managed to escape from Ayad when he managed to flag down a passing car and get in. So we were told. I mean, you don't know, do you? But you know, it took about 12 coppers to calm him down eventually. In fact, the first day he was due in court, he didn't go because he was still a danger to the public as far as the police were concerned.
But yeah.
So, mate, all this commotion's happening in Australia. At what time was it in Australia?
Well, it would have been around about 11 o'clock, I think, at night. So over here it's 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I guess. So it's obviously hours later when we find out about it.
And how does that news then break to yourself?
Well, I got in the pub to watch the match, as you do. Yeah, so Sam's at home by herself because Liv and Dan lived in Liverpool, and was Dan working? No, Dan wouldn't have been working. Liv was working at Oh Me Oh My, funnily enough. So Sam's by herself. I'm in the pub, 150 miles away, whatever it is. And Sam gets a knock on the door, 9 o'clock, she said, and it's a copper. And Sam sort of knows. She used to be friendly with the policewoman in the younger days. So she's like, there's only one of them, so no one's dead. Because apparently, if there's a death, they come as a pair, which is what happened to Rosie, Mia's mum. So this policeman said, you know, can I come in? He said, so you don't say no, do you? And then he said, is there anyone you can, have you got anyone with you? And she said, no, my husband's away, the kids are in Liverpool. is there anyone you can have come and stay with you for a bit? And she's like, wonder which one, you know. She's telling me this. It's going through my head. Well, it's one or three, isn't it? It's either Dan, Liv or Les. Anyway, and then he said, your son's been attacked. Tom's been attacked. Here's a number. You need to phone the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. They'll bring you more up to date. But he's been attacked and he's in a critical condition. Now, I don't know who told Sam this, but when she eventually got through to me, she told me what happened, and then she said, we've been told to expect the worst. Now, how Sam cope with that? Steve Nash, who's a great friend of ours, he only lives over the road, and she'd called Steve would come over. They'd been trying to get hold of me, but the Fox and Hounds in Old Stratford, no signal. I knew there was no signal.
That's why you went there.
No, the closest pub. But you know, you're only there for a couple of hours, aren't you? You have something to eat, you have a pint, you watch the match. So as soon as I come out the pub, I must have been 50 yards away from the pub, and the phone goes. And I'm like, and we'd stop talking after footy matches because it's a bit, you know, we've been beating Hamilton 5-0. Even if it's a contentious game, if me and Sam don't agree on it, you don't want to fall out anymore, do you? So we just don't bother. So I think, you know, she must have enjoyed that, you know. So I said, all right, girl, good win that, eh? Yeah, okay, listen, Tom's being attacked and he's in a critical condition. I'm like, and everything, at that moment, everything just changes. It's completely surreal, I think. But it was for me. I mean, I don't know other people. If you'd have asked me, I don't know why anyone would, but let's say hypothetically, before something like this happened years ago, how do you think you'd react if you heard that news? I'd be like, well, obviously I'd be upset and shocked, but I'd stiff up a bit, you know, you've got to be strong for your family and all that. Sam taught me that, and I was gone. And he wasn't even dead at that time. And I was just like, everything just changed around me. It was like I was in a different place. Couldn't believe it. Anyway, so Sam told me what she told me. You know what, I can't even remember if I spoke to Steve. Although I noticed on my phone I had a couple of messages from Steve later, because they had been trying to get hold of me, on for a few minutes, fortunately, because nearly kick off, so we finished at 9:15. So anyway, yeah, put the phone and I just belted up that hill like I've never done in my life. Just threw a few things in the bag. I was just, honest to God though, I don't know how I got home, because I was just like completely useless. I think it would have been different if I'd have been home with Sam, you know what I mean, where we could have been there for each other. But like, she's by herself. I needed her at the time as much as anything. And you're
on your own at this point?
You know what I mean? Yeah, 3 hours away. Just threw a few things in the bag. And I phoned out a good friend of ours, a minister, Heather, and I phoned her, and I put this in the book actually. Our Alan got run over a few years earlier. And it sounds like a daft thing to say, but I look back and I thought I could have prayed a bit more. I mean, I'm an ex-BB lad, so I've got that background. I'm not a church goer now or anything, but I have got that. I'm sure I didn't do as much as I could for our kid. I didn't pray for him, you know what I mean? It sounds daft, doesn't it? So I got on the road to Heather. I just said, Heather. I told her what had happened, like. I said, just pray for Tom. And bloody hell, she was brilliant.
It's mad, isn't it? How, again, you might not be religious in that sense, or you might not be thinking of it, but in that moment, you just need to reach out and ask someone to pray for you.
Yeah, and she was brilliant ever since, to be honest. She supported us. She visited us. I mean, she lived that far away, but she was always round if we needed anything. She even read Sam's statement out on the telly, because Sam wasn't in any state to do that. So she even did that for Sam. So Yeah, we got a lot to be grateful to Heather for. All our friends.
And then are you thinking, Les, like, that I've got to find a way quickly to try and get to Australia somehow?
I hadn't even given it a thought. You know what? Just going back to the phone call. I said to Sam, "But I'm coming home." Like it was. I would not come home.
That you were going
I'm coming home.
Yeah.
Of course you're coming home, you dickhead. The son's lying in hospital in bloody wherever it was in Townsville.
Just shows how your mind just he just doesn't
I just wanted to get home then. So I was just like in the car, shot up the motorway. It must be getting on for 10 o'clock now, certainly 9:30, and the motorway's crawling, couldn't believe it. I'm like, well, what's all this traffic? I need to get home. Anyway, so I wasn't even thinking at that stage of getting to Australia. I was thinking of getting home. And when I got home about 12:30, I think, just after midnight. And obviously the kids were there then. Steve had gone to Liverpool and picked them up for us because, you know, it was the quickest way for them to get home rather than them jump on the train and Steve pick them up from Crewe. So they were home, Steve had gone home, and Sam, while I'd been going home and all this had been going, she'd be on the internet sorting flights out for me. She said, "There's one going at 9 o'clock in the morning from Manchester if you want it." And I'm like, yeah, I'm on it. Not even thinking about visas or anything.
Of course,
yeah, shit, you don't think about that, do you?
But they'd obviously been primed to expect a visa application because I just submitted it and it came through right away. So that was it. Didn't have any kip. Steve gave me a lift to the airport at 6 o'clock or something in the morning, whatever it was.
And just didn't sleep that night, no?
No one slept that
night.
No.
Well, you got, it sounds like a stupid question, but I mean, what's even getting said that? I mean, because I'm guessing you're still in the dark with what's going on. You haven't got that much information.
All we know, San had the Foreign and Commonwealth Office number, so I spoke to them again. I think San had tried. Oh no, I think I phoned the hospital because San had spoken to them, but they'd only speak to San because they were very wary of getting media calls from people pretending to be media, because already it was starting to be a big news story. I mean, it was on Sky News from about 3 o'clock in the morning. You know, headlines. Obviously, 2 Brits had been attacked. Mia had died pretty much right away. She died in the bathroom.
Did you watch it again? Stupid question.
No.
Did you? Yeah.
I didn't know that, and I think I might have caught a bit of it at the airport. It's a bit foggy, the memory now, to be honest. All around it, it's a bit foggy, the memory.
I can't imagine what that flight must have been. It's a long flight anyway.
Yeah.
But I mean, knowing what you're going to be, witnessing when you get over there.
The thing was, you just don't know, do you? You're just dreading. Because you're in the air for the best part of 24 hours. You've got the break in Abu Dhabi. But your mind's just running riot. What did he know? Had something happened? All I knew was that we'd been told to prepare for the worst. They'd operated on him. Don't know what they did, but they'd operated on him. But prepare for the worst. He was in a therapeutic coma, and they were just monitoring the pressure in his brain. Obviously, he had machines breathing for him and taking his heart rate and all that. But they couldn't scan his. They wouldn't know how bad the damage was until they could scan his brain, and they couldn't scan his brain until the pressure had subsided.
The swelling had gone.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, when I got off at Abu Dhabi, I phoned home to see if there was any news, and there wasn't. No change. I was just in tears all the time. I was like a big girl. Honestly, you just people are milling all around him, sitting there. So, God.
I don't blame you, mate. Yeah,
I think I'd be exactly the same.
Yeah.
So obviously, when I got off at in Brisbane, just before we were landing, one of the stewards come to me and said, "You sit near the door." There was a seat near the door, so obviously they'd had the call through, and then I was first off. There was a young girl in front of me. She was like steaming to get off. And she's like, you're not going anywhere. He's off first. What's so special about him? I need to kill him.
Oh, fucking no.
And I'm thinking, obviously there wasn't any special girls, you know what I mean? But yeah, I mean, from that part, I was just like whizzed right. Someone would have looked at my passport, but it was just a copper in it. Yeah, that's all right. Off you go into a was it a police car? No, it wouldn't have been a police car at that stage. I went to they took me to a room in a VIP room because the British High Commissioner was there. She'd been to
place where the attack had happened.
Where the attack went to Home Hill, yeah. And she was on her way back to Canberra. So, and I had to catch a plane up to Townsville, but that wasn't due for another 2 hours, I think. So they put me. So I just got to go and have a chat with her. She was lovely, Mena Rawlings, her name is. She's not the High Commissioner. No,
it sounds like, sorry to interrupt, but it sounds like the logistical side of things from the Australian British. It sounds like it all went as well as it could be and stuff.
The British consulate were brilliant, absolutely brilliant. As I said, I mean, they had someone waiting for me with Australian police as well, but it was the British consulate who sorted all that out. You couldn't follow.
Which is mad to think that something can happen the other side of the world, and yet within hours they can get things
organised.
They've been up at Home Hill as well. They've been obviously consular representation there, because there's loads of Brits in the hostel, and that's why Menard had been up there to see what was going on. Big Chelsea supporter, Menard, by the way. Only found that out recently.
And had you mentioned about like media calling the hospital? No media tried to contact you at all, or like?
Not at that stage. They had tried to. I mean, I don't know what time it would have been in England now. Well, obviously it was the next day. 24 hours later would be next night. So it had all started kicking off, not the right word, but there was loads of media attention then in Congleton, I believe. It was a van at the top of the street. And over the period of time that we were, certainly up until Tom died and just after, they were getting knocks on the door and the window and all. So the police liaison officer, the family liaison officer, he eventually put a note up outside the door saying, politely, but
fuck off,
leave them alone.
Yeah, because it was a massive big story, like, because there was talk, wasn't there, that potentially there was terrorism involved, and all that, and that they got pushed out because the media were too quick to jump on what he said. He
never said Allahu akbar. He said brûlez moi, which was burn me. He was convinced that the French farmers were trying to kill him, apparently. And the police knew that at the time, because there were other French people there. They told them exactly what he had said. But then they can't publicise that, because it's an ongoing case now. So while the rest of the world is saying, oh, this is another terrorist attack, Donald Trump, a few months later, that list of incidents that should have been classed as terrorist attacks but weren't because of the inefficiencies of police forces around the world, he put Tom and Mia on that. So,
really?
Yeah. They were the only ones put on that weren't terrorist attacks. Well, he's just a nutter, isn't he? So they were on that. So apparently there was a lot going on in
Congleton.
Congleton. When I got to Townsville, so after I met a mate of Tom's, Jamie Nash Steve's son. He was teaching, still is, in Thailand, in Bangkok. As soon as he found out, he'd known Tom since he started school together. Or he started the term after Tom, but you know what I mean, same age, 5. He was on the next flight out. So I met up with him at Brisbane airport, flew up to Townsville, and that's when, once we got to the hospital, the press were there.
Is that when the severity of the... I only think, mate, again, it'd be interesting, to know my dad's thing on this, but when I was in Afghanistan, he was told very little, and it was only when he got to the hospital and he said that's when it hit him. Yeah. And I'm guessing he bloody hell, he had a 2-hour trip down the M6 to Birmingham. You've had a 24-hour flight to Australia, but for him, he said it was only when he got to the hospital did he realise that it's not just he's been injured, he's properly injured, yeah.
Well, I knew it was bad. I mean, when someone says that you prepare for the worst, you know it's bad, don't you? I was just glad I'd got to Brisbane and then and there was no further bad news. So in my head, it's like, well, he's kept going this far.
Yeah.
So I went in. I went into the hospital. Got into the hospital. And you just get taken to see. Yeah, man. I had a chat with the doctor first. He's a young doctor. He was white as a sheet. You know, he had nothing else to tell me, but he was still alive. But basically, he was like, "We don't know what's going to happen. We've got to wait till the pressure. He might recover. He might be, you know, he might be mentally impaired, or he might not recover. We just don't know." Now I look back, and my opinion is, having seen his wounds and all that, and I could be talking broken biscuits here, but I think if you'd have said to them, "Okay, but what do you really think's going to happen?" I think they'd have said, "You've got no chance, mate." I mean, he had stabbed wounds, hadn't he? You know what I mean, on the back of his, and he'd been stabbed through the eye. So, but I'm like, well, he's still breathing. He's on a ventilator. And he's got a patch over his eye. It was just heartbreaking to see him. You know what I mean? I just held his hand and broke down again.
Again, it might sound stupid, but did you have hope at that point?
Yeah, I had hope all the way through. And I think was it the next day or the day after? I don't even know. By this time, I don't know what day it is.
You haven't slept,
I haven't slept. I did sleep that night then, so I saw Tom. I wasn't with him for that long because obviously he was. Well, he never recovered, so he was in a coma. I might have got a couple of hours kept just on the cot. It was bloody freezing, I remember that. It was all air conditioned, the hospital, as you'd expect. And they had some couple of rooms on site where relatives could stay as a one-off. And I was there, but I hardly slept at all. I ended up over the road in the Red Cross accommodation for the rest of the stay, or the rest of the stay in Townsville. Sorry, I forgot what the question was. Oh, hope. Yeah, so at some stage between me getting there and us being informed about the fact that we never informed his dad that he was at best going to be in a permanent vegetative state. They had the ophthalmic surgeons in to look at his eyes, to look at the eye that had been damaged. Now they couldn't do anything to save that, and they never could do anything to save the sight, but they were trying to save the eye so that, as they said to me, he wouldn't have to have a false eye. So by that stage I wasn't bothered. I just wanted him to be able to come home. But the fact that they'd been trying to save his eye, that just gave me a bit more hope. I thought, well, you know, these fellas think it's worth trying to save his eye.
Yeah.
And I think, to be honest though, I think it was the day after that when me and Jamie just got called to a meeting and you know, they just sat us down and basically told us. They said we managed to do the scan and I think, what did he say? There's nothing going from his brain stem to his brain. I think that's what they said. There's no blood flow from his brain stem to his brain. So unfortunately, there's no hope for him, basically. And I didn't even react. I just bowed my head. So you say, did you always hope? I think I always had hope, but my reaction then tells me maybe it just wasn't that big a shock. But it wasn't a big shock. You're steeling yourself for it.
And he's there just his friend at the time then? That's just you and him?
Just me and Jamie, yeah.
Fucking hell, mate.
It's hard, that.
I'm speechless. I can't even imagine, mate, what you've had to go through.
Well, that's why I don't dwell on it, to be honest. I mean, lots of people have similar experiences, don't they? Look at what your parents saw to your leg. I mean,
I know, mate. It's such a fucking. I mean, mine's different in the sense it was at war, and this is just your son's on holiday. Do you know what I mean? What
did you know anything? Like, I suppose you weren't bothered about what happened, because what happened, didn't it? But
about the attack, you mean?
Yeah. But were you like angry, or were you like just
nothing? In fact, funny enough, I've written another chapter for the book. I don't know whether I'll ever publish it, but I've written another chapter what's happened recently, and this isn't supposed to be. I think I'm still under an information notice, which means I'm not supposed to say anything. But I don't care. So Ayad's been deported now. He's gone back to France. Now I've never given Ayad at any time a passing thought. When I went out there, all my focus was Tom. You know, hoping he'd recover and getting him home. And after he'd gone, it was the family then. I never gave Ayad a moment's thought. Not interested. Even when I saw him, I went out 18 months, nearly 2 years later for the mental health tribunal, where basically he got, they said, unsound of mind, so we're not. And I went out because I'd been tipped the wing that was probably going to happen. So that's why I went out to it. And when I saw him, he shuffled in. He was under guard, obviously. He was chained up, handcuffed and everything. And he had shackles around his legs, ankles, whatever. But it just... He just never invoked any emotion in me whatsoever. But when I heard he'd been deported, or he was going to be... Basically, what the wording was is, border force. Let's take a step back. He'd recently been given permission to have a minimal amount of escorted leave off campus, and that the campus being the grounds around the mental health facility he was in. So he'd been given permission to have minimal escorted leave off. Now, apparently at the tribunal, I don't remember this, but at the tribunal, the border force representative there had said, once he's fit to travel, we'll be having him. Border force being responsible for, deporting him. So basically, this letter said, border force have removed him from. Basically, that's all it said. Border force have removed him from this facility. So I'm like, what does that mean? So I immediately fired back. Okay, so where is he now? Is he being incarcerated somewhere else pending deportation? When will we know what's going on? And then I thought, does that mean he's already been deported? So, and the answer I got back was, I've already asked those questions for you, Les. The only information we've got is what you've got in the letter. So to me, it just seemed a bit callous. It wasn't there. I mean, our liaison over there, Karen, she's been great as well. It wasn't her fault. But I just couldn't believe that. You've got one Australian governmental department who's responsible for his welfare and basically the welfare of people he might come into contact with if he's still mentally unwell, yeah. And then you've got border, and I understand Australia don't want to keep him. It cost them an arm and a leg. It's not, it shouldn't be their responsibility forever. But the fact that he's gone out for a walk, this how it is in my head. He's gone out for a walk with his mind. They send someone and say, "Yeah, come on, thank you." And so I can only assume that he must have been deported because he couldn't have been held in Australia in another facility.
So will he just go into like a mental asylum in France then?
Well, don't know. We'll never know. No one will ever tell us. Australia have washed their hands. There's no obligation for anyone in France to tell us anything. So we'll never know. And it was then. That's what that my reaction to that news was far worse than anything I'd thought about Ayad up until then. I was like, hang on a minute, what's going on? And it made me sit back and think and wonder why I was so sanguine about him.
Yeah. As in, like, you didn't, because you see sometimes that people, you know, lost loved ones or some, you know, things happen, people murder, and then there's a massive big fight, isn't there, to try, you know, and like, and that takes all their energy. Yeah. Whereas with you, it was just a case of, I'm just not bothered about it. Like, I don't want to even like to take space in my mind.
Because I'd come to the conclusion he'd taken so much from us. He wasn't taking anymore. So, and that I thought that's why I haven't been interested. And the more I thought about it, funny enough, Rosie's written a good book, Mia's mum Rosie, Far From Home, about the daughter and about what happened. And she's strongly campaigned since Mia died to improve the working visa situation over there. And got a bit of a result recently, actually, because with this new trade deal we've got with Australia, they're supposed to be scrapping that for UK youngsters. So they won't have to do this 88 days.
All right.
But in her book, Rosie talks about a forgiving Ayad. And I don't know if you watched that Time by Jimmy McGovern.
Yeah, brilliant.
And it is brilliant, isn't it? And the wife of the husband who...
The alcoholic
who's Sean Bean.
Drunk driving, yeah.
Killed, says to him, I need to forgive you, but I can't. And given the news of that, both those give me a bit of a pause for thought, really. And I came to the conclusion is I don't need to forgive him. I don't need to forgive him to move on. I never have, because he just doesn't feature. So he might want me to forgive him. That's tough. I don't forgive him. I don't mean that negatively. I don't hold any malice towards him. It's not the polar opposite of forgiving him. It's not like I do not forgive him, if you know what I mean. I just don't feel the need. I don't need to feel the need. I've never been in a position where I felt I needed to move on. I said it right away. This is not going to ruin the rest of my life. I'm not going to let this ruin the rest of my life.
It's very brave of you, mate. I know what you mean as well, in the sense that I've read reports and stuff, and they say that, you know, love is such strong emotion, hate's a strong emotion. When you get to that bit in the middle where it's nothing, that's when it could be anything, you know, in a relationship, you know, someone breaks your heart and then you're hung up. It's when you get to them when you don't care about it. Yeah. That's when you've kind of moved on, I guess, isn't it? Where it's that hate that he could have took from you, which could have then, you know, just suck up all your life.
I've never spent too much time worrying about things I can't influence. Do you know what I mean? And maybe that comes into it a bit. You know, he was just someone over there who did something, and I need to now deal with the effect of that. I don't need to deal with the cause. Do you know what I mean? So that's how I dealt with it. And this is only happened maybe it was May, only last month, a couple of months ago, when the deportation thing came through. So I quickly got my head around that and went, I'm not going down there. That's
because again, mate, it commends you so much for how you have handled it, because you can see how it could drive people to do you know what I mean?
Yeah, eat you up alive. Yeah, big style.
And obviously, no doubt your family and friends are very thankful of how you've managed to, because again, mate, it's.
I mean, who knows? It might be different if he'd have been fully compos mentis, and you know he showed no remorse and all that. I don't know, but he was found by four individual psychiatrists, to have been unsound of mind. Now, either you accept that. You know, either you accept due process is being followed, these are experts, and they say he wasn't responsible for his actions at the time. Either you accept that and move on, or you go mad. I think.
100%.
Will he always then be? You think again? I know you don't want to, but
I don't know. You mean would he be?
Well, just in general, if someone's like classed as, I don't know, not sound of mind, are they constantly, that's them then?
Well, no, they can be. In fact, he was constantly reviewed. He was, you know, as it was.
I'm just thinking, like in general, not just in this case, but in general, if someone's not sound of mind and they do an awful crime, and then 20 years later they're found to be fit of mind.
Yeah, when does that bridge get crossed?
Yeah,
like,
surely they've got to be.
No, it was unsound of mind at the time of the attack. He was unsound of mind when he perpetrated the attacks. He could have been, and he wasn't. But he could have been, a month later, he could have been sane, theoretically. And now he might have had trouble saying, I'm sane now a month later, but I wasn't a month ago. He might have had trouble proving that. But technically, he could have said a month later, I'm sane, but I wasn't then.
That's mad, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, crazy.
So, and that's what happened now. I have no idea. I would imagine if he can if he can prove to be
sane, yes, yeah,
he'll probably be released at some stage again. I mean, I'm gonna say that I don't know what I can't imagine that the French authorities are just going to
just let him go,
because the Australian authorities would have informed him why he was in a mental health facility, you know, what he did.
Yeah,
potential danger is to other people, so
yeah, 100%,
they'll take that on board, I'm sure.
How soon was it, Les, then you decided to leave Australia then and come back to the UK, come back home?
Not long. I was there 2 weeks and told me that Liv came out. Funny enough, it's not funny. The day we found out, we were given the news that he wasn't going to recover, was the 27th. And Liv was was due to be bridesmaid for a friend that day. For close friends of ours, so we were all going. In fact, when I phoned Sam up to tell her the news, because what a phone call that was.
Sorry, mate. Was Sandra? Was she in Hope as well? Was she kind of thinking? Was she as well? Yeah.
Hope. It was only when we were given the news that he wasn't going to recover. I'd give Sandy news about his eye. You know, he couldn't save his eye, but we were like, oh, it's not the end of the world. You know, we just need to get Tom home. So we still had hope. It was only when they gave us the news that he wasn't going to recover that, and that phone call. They're getting ready to go to this wedding, and how do you tell them?
I know, it's hard to describe that.
It's just like, it's not good news, I'm afraid. But fair play to them. Liv was a bridesmaid, so they all went and did the bit. Never told anyone. I think, and Sam and Liv came home a bit earlier then. You know, basically after they stayed for the drink after the meal and that, but then they came home. Dan stayed to have a few pints. Tom and Dan were like that, you know. They were big mates as well as brothers, and he'd stayed for a few pints, and he let it slip to one of his mates. I think, you know, basically, his mate must have been going about with Tom coming home. I'm guessing this. I don't know. You know, and Dan had to say he's not coming home, mate. And. I forgot where we were there, mate.
I was just, no, it's right.
How long were we there? So after that, Liv then flew out after the wedding. So Tom's still on a ventilator because they've now broached the subject of
organ donors, was it?
Organ ownership, yeah. And apparently it's not a very big thing over there in Australia. So they basically tentatively broached it with me, and I'm like, do what you need to do to get ready, and I'll speak to the family. Because as far as I was concerned, it didn't make any sense not for Tom to help someone if he could. I didn't think for a minute Tom, you know, wouldn't want that to happen. I said, you do what you need to do to prepare, and I'll speak to the family, and as long as there's no dissenting voices, then we'll do it. So he's still on, and obviously I did, and funny enough, he'd had a conversation with Phil, he'd worked with Phil for a few months. Phil's in telecom, so he'd helped him out. And Phil said apparently Phil had said, funny enough, we've discussed this. And presumably because they got fed up talking about footy, although I'm not sure that happened. And Tom was very much in favour of it, so we just said, yeah, go ahead. So he was still on a ventilator. He was still, nothing, if you went to see, nothing had changed. He was still on the ventilator. He was still getting monitored. But he said, his heart may well eventually stop of his own accord soon. And that's right. So the 27th was the Saturday. Nothing happens on the Sunday. They scan him on the Monday. And he died. He'd actually, even though he's on the bed, he'd stopped living, technically. And they said he'd probably died on the Sunday, but his date of death will be the Monday. So we have this week now, which starts on the 23rd when he got attacked. Goes to the 27th when we found out he wasn't going to recover. 29th when he officially died, but he probably died on the 28th. Now I know for Sam the 27th is the worst day for her, because that's when we knew he wasn't coming back. But Liv still managed to get out, even though she knew the score by then. Obviously she knew the score at the wedding, before the wedding. But she managed to see him before they took him down. And we had a bunch of family come up from Melbourne. Also a good mate of Tom's, Ryan. He'd flown down immediately from Cairns. He'd met Tom on Tresco. This is a funny story. It's a funny story. He'd left. His dad's a Scouser from Old Swan, and he'd been chefing, I think. He was a trainee chef in Canberra. Excuse me, I'm cramping me leg. Canberra, and he decided, right, so this, if I'm going to be a chef, I'm going to do it. Probably he flew to London, got a job, just blagged his way into it. He wanted to learn the ropes. He wasn't blagging that he knew chef, but he learned, became a chef in London, and then decided he'd go and do something on the island. So he flew out to Tresco, and he was the breakfast chef. Now when Tom flew in, he was the breakfast waiter. So they were away from the other staff in the separate rooms right next to the restaurant, I think. Now Tom was as big a red as they come, Tom. From when he could talk, he was a red. He'd been all over watching him. So, because the first question is, you just suppose, Liverpool, Liverpool, and that was they were best mates forever and a day after that. So Ryan back in Australia by now. As soon as he heard, he was on a flight down to, and they wouldn't let him in because he wasn't family. He had no idea who he was. Flown back to Cairns, and then when I arrived, flew back again. But unfortunately, Tom had gone by then. I think he came in the day before Liv.
Obviously had a lot of support, and he's obviously very well liked.
He was a bit like yourself. He was a people person. He loved people. His friends were the most important thing to him, and his family. But his friends were the most important thing to him. Yeah, he was well liked.
Yeah. How does it work with getting him home and that kind of stuff?
Well, I didn't know there is help available. There's financial help. I didn't know this at the time. I got a call off the.
Right, yeah.
I got a call off the Premier of Queensland. I'm sitting in the welfare officer's office in Townsville Hospital, and she gets a call and she says, okay, she says, the Premier of Queensland's going to give you a bell in a minute. I went, okay. So Tom's died by now. So I get this call, and his secretary says, I have the Queensland Premier. The Premier of Queensland says, okay. And I'm like, they've all left the room. I'm like, what they were calling? Her name's Anastasia Palashuk. I'm like, was it Queen? So she comes, she says, hello, miss. I said, hello, Anastasia, how's it going? and she'd stood up in Parliament that day, and she'd nominated Tom for the Bravery Award that day. That's what she said in Parliament. So we just had a chat about that. She gave me the condolences and that. She said, is there anything else I can do for you? And I said, well, you could lend me your private jet to get him home. I said, oh, I don't think we can do that. I said, okay. She, you know, it was just a bit of a joke on my part. Because at this stage, I'm like, no idea what... Obviously...
You probably had still cabbage,
we'll get him home somehow. You know, I've got my credit card with me, whatever, but I wasn't sure how it was going to work. So I said... in fact, I'd been threatening to start with about his health bills. But there's a reciprocal agreement between the UK and England for these types of cases. If you'd end up in, you know, having a stay in hospital, I don't think you can just turn up to a hospital with a sore arm and get it. But if you end up staying in hospital, it's covered. So that was off me. I didn't have to worry about that anymore. But about 10 minutes later, I get a call saying, not off the Premier, but I think it was off his secretary, saying the Premier would like to pay for his transport home. That's all fair play. As it turned out, I think that's just for, you know,
it's the done thing anyway.
It's the done thing, and I think if it had been a done thing, I don't. He was saying that, but there are procedures in place to allow you to get your loved ones home. I mean, if I'd have had to pay for it, I could have claimed it back from the British government when they got home and found all this out.
It's just all mad things you don't even think about.
Yeah, of course, no logistics and like afterwards that you have to then worry about and fret about and.
Yeah. The fact then a bravery awards, he's, you know.
But he's had a couple of bravery awards. He got the award of the Queen's Gallantry Medal. And funny enough, we picked that up on his birthday, 7th of November. He would have been 33. So Sam got that. Sam picked that up from Prince William. And he's been awarded the Star of Courage from Australia. So that's in the pipeline. We're probably going to go down to Australia House to pick that up. He got lots of others. In fact, he's been awarded one from the Australasian, the Royal Humane Society of Australasia.
Wow.
And that's I think it's the Clive posthumous medal. And then lots of local stuff as well.
Is it a park named after him as well or something? I think there's in the book.
There's not a the Congleton Town Council created a garden of remembrance.
That must be, yeah.
Oh, garden of remembrance. Although I think that's getting moved to the town centre at some stage soon, because there's another young girl died in an accident maybe 12 months ago, and so they're going to put them together. But yeah, there's a bench at Hatton Park where there's the best thing. You know, one of the best things though is mates. There's a field by us where they all used to play footy when they were kids. You know, like we used to play out in the streets. Well, these used to go and play on this field. And completely, we knew nothing about this. We just got a call one day say, come up to Newby Field. And they bought a bench. They'd all come together, but a nice bench, you know, not something like IKEA that you would get yourself. And it's got a lovely plaque on it, and it's something in love and memory of Tom Jacko Jackson. 1985 to 2016. This was his Wembley. Brilliant.
Love for that.
Yeah. But going back to the original, we left just after. We left Queensland and we went up to Cairns to stay with Ryan and his family for a few days. We want, you know what? Ryan offered. I never asked. Ryan offered, and I took him up because I didn't want my last thought of being the hospital in Townsville. Do you know what I mean? So we just went over a nice few days in Cairns. Didn't do much. We just chilled out.
And then come back and then
come back business class. That was great.
Well, I don't know about great, but
no, what's so crazy about this, mate?
Well, yeah.
Is just in the space. I mean, it's so easy, isn't it, to say, you know, how. I think people just say it so flippantly, don't they? Oh, you know, you only live once, or you know, this and that, these little words. But from your story, literally within 2 weeks of that trip in Australia, you get watching a match. Those 2 weeks of your life, things never. It's just
yeah.
The word I use a lot is surreal. It was surreal then, and that's never really gone away. It's still a bit surreal.
And then following that, Les, do you like stay out of like court cases and what goes on there? You just literally just try, like, obviously back in Congleton and just sort of rebuilding.
You mean court cases to do with this?
Yeah.
Well, there's that. I mean, the tribunal, the mental health tribunal I went to was the last. That was it.
Yeah.
I wasn't planning to go. It was only when they said there's a good chance, it's not going to go any further. I thought, well, I'm going to go then.
And again, it sounds like a stupid question. How is the family now? How's Liv and Dan and Sandra? I mean, how?
You know what? I think we're learning to live. You do learn to. You never get over it. I don't think you'd ever get over it, but you learn to live with it. You just do, because if you don't, you go mad. So you just learn to live. I'm sure we'll all have our own moments where, it hits you again. And that's another thing I've put in this new chapter about publishing. It's such a, although me and Sam have a connection there because we were his parents, so we've got that shared connection. And then you've got Dan and Liv and us as his family, but you've still got that deep personal connection as well. That deep personal loss that only you can feel the way you do at that particular time. Because you've all got your own personalities. You've all got your own history with Tom. You're all remembering for different things. So there are times when sometimes it'll just hit you. And I'm sure that's the same with the kids and with Sam. But as a family, I think we've dealt with it pretty well. And I shout out again to our friends. Every step of the way they've been with us. Fantastic.
And have you kept in touch with Mia's family?
Yeah, but funny enough, Rosie she lives in not far from Matlock. It's only like 30 or 40 miles from us. Could have been anywhere in the country, couldn't it? But 30 or 40 miles from us. We're going to stay up there. End of this month, July. We haven't seen her for a while because of the pandemic. It's not like we're there all the time, but we often meet up in Buxton because that's halfway between the two. Often. We've met up a couple of times in Buxton, have a meal, a cup of tea or something. She's been like a mad one. What she took on after Mia died, back and forth to Australia, haranguing politicians. Fair play to her, take my hat off to her.
Did it help, Les, when you decided to write the book then as well? Did that help sort of get things out?
That's how the book came about. I wrote about Tom. I might trip over there, and that was the idea behind it. Let's get this. It's off my chest, if you like. It wasn't really off my chest. It was like, well, let's just write about it.
It's therapeutic, though.
Yeah, cathartic, and then the book just developed around that.
No, it's obviously not nice what happened, but it's nice how as a football fan it's linked in. It's got that, how Liverpool have been doing, experience of going the match, and then it's again.
Even that chapter about Tom, the first, it's got two bits to it, 3 bits to it now. Well, when I first wrote it, the first words were, "That'll do me," as I drew my pint glass after Danny Sturridge had scored the 5th goal. That's how I started it, because that's how it started for me. That was the last thing before I left the pub. Sturridge had scored the 5th. It was like 5 minutes ago or whatever. I'll get off now. I don't think they're coming back. Being Albion. So that's how so I always had that, I guess, in my head. There'll be such a football in here.
One advice I will give to anyone who does decide to read it is do not read it on public transport. Which is, I was up to the chapter anyway of when you talk about that, and it was pretty hard reading, as it has been today, listening to you, mate, and how you've managed to put it into a book is amazing, and how you are now with it, mate, it's so commendable. I don't know many people who'd be able to react the same way you did with so much,
going on.
That's very kind of you to say, mate.
It's been a real pleasure, mate. It's you anything else, Tom?
No. Thank you so much, lads, for sharing it. Honestly, I'm always, it's conscious. It's so difficult for you, having to talk and go through everything that.
It's not. I've always talked about it. If anyone wants to talk to me about it, I'll talk about it. I've never had a problem talking about Tom or what happened. I guess it helps me.
Yeah,
it's interesting. The last few guests we've had on men actually who've lost their sons.
Yeah.
Actually, we've had Mark McVeigh from the Owen McVeigh Foundation on. We had Mark King who lost his son Oliver King from a cardiac arrest, who's been campaigning to get defibs put in, and yourself. And I guess for me and Tom, just to kind of hold this space, it's probably one of the reasons we've done the podcast in the first place, just to get a little glimpse of people's lives. I think that's where you learn a lot, and I know I've definitely took a lot from
100%
from this, mate. It's how you can I think a big one, mate, is just how your energy, how you can not give any more energy to someone who's took so much. Just, the best thing is just to not, that's it, and focus on the things you can have an impact on. It's
100%, and just like for me, it's like, if I walk past you in the street, if I walk past Mark in the street, you just don't know what people, have got, like that lady on the flight who wanted to get off first, she's just got no idea that what people, have gone through, have been through, or are going through, so
that's one thing it's taught me. You don't know. You just, when it happens to you, you think you're the only one, and then you realise that actually you're not. And there's people walking about all over the place who've got similar stories to tell.
It's like that message in it, just smile. You don't know what someone's going through, so just try and be nice to people.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Les.
Mate,
no worries. Thanks, guys.
Do you want to, sorry, just for people at home who are listening, what's the name of the book again that people can...
A Life Well Read.
Where can they find it?
Only on Amazon.
Actually,
I've just dropped a couple of copies off at the News from Nowhere bookshop on Bowl Street. So
we'll put all the links and stuff in the bio, mate, so make sure you get a copy, But cheers, Les.
Thank you, mate.
Guys. Thanks
Cheers, pal.